Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, and Byron Nelson were all born in 1912, but it was Nelson, a lanky, baby-faced Texan, who first gained major attention when he won the 1937 Masters. 2 years later, he won the U.S. Open. Not since Harry Vardon had anyone hit the ball with such unremitting accuracy. His swing was the first to adapt successfully to the new and different demands of the steel-shafted club. While the rest of the world continued to imitate Bobby Jones, Nelson put some action in his legs. When in form, Byron Nelson simply did not miss-hit a shot. In 1945, he was close to unbeatable. There were 35 tournaments that year. Nelson won 18 of them. Even more incredibly, he won 11 of those events in one glorious unbroken string. The next longest streak, before or since, is 5. His season scoring average, 68.33, a record. In 30 events, he never finished worse than 9th.
Now, it's very easy to dismiss him and say, well, nobody was there. Who did he beat? The war was on. He did it all, just a joyous game of golf, knocking a ball around. But you take all that out of it and actually look at the scores he did. Now, if you go and play virtually on your own, just with someone to keep the score for you, you can build up your own demons because you can become afraid because you're doing so well. Oh my God, if I get 2 pars, I'll do a 64, that'll break the course. And you become, these inner demons take over and you can mess up. He never did.
Nelson's total prize money for that year of years was $63,000. By today's standards, that would be roughly $10 million. Byron retired young, just as Samuel Jackson Snead was getting warmed up. After one West Coast victory, the young West Virginia hayseed wondered how the New York Times got his picture, since he'd never been to New York. Well, he may have been naive, but could he ever hit the ball?
He's got the greatest swing of all time. People talk about, Hogan's swing. Well, Hogan manufactured that swing. Sam's natural. That's just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
I never saw him take a swing that it looked like there's any labor whatsoever to turn or to move. He was just free and easy. When we first came out on the tour, people would ask Sam how he learned to play, and he says, I don't know, I just draws it back and hits it.
Although completely self-taught, Snead was blessed with a supremely supple body and an innately perfect rhythm.
He's always been a physical guy. He always trained. He did push-ups and sit-ups and all that stuff. He always asked you, hit me in the stomach, look how hard my stomach is.
He said to me, how many push-ups can you do? And I said, I don't know, I was 15 years of age, and I didn't want to admit I didn't do push-ups, but you could always struggle through 10 of them, and I did, but at my own peril. Because of course, then he got down on his fingertips, just bounced to, just jump up in the air off his fingertips.
Snead's total of 84 victories outnumbered any man in history. Among these, 3 Masters, 3 PGAs, and a British Open in his only appearance across the pond. But there was one glorious omission: the U.S. Open. Sam Snead was the Methuselah of the fairways. He's the oldest player to win on the PGA Tour, having recorded at least 1 victory every year until 1962, a quarter century after he began. At age 62, he tied for 3rd in the PGA. When he won on the Senior Tour in 1980, he became the first golfer to record victories in 6 different decades. He will likely be the last, for Sam Snead was one of a kind. While Snead played golf naturally, Ben Hogan dug it out of the dirt. Just 5 feet 8 inches tall and 135 pounds, Hogan was the runt of the caddy pen at the same club where Byron Nelson caddied.
A bunch of those caddies would line up and hit balls, and the one hit the shortest one had to go get them, bring them back. And so Ben found out that have hard ground, that if he'd turn his left hand over and roll the ball and hook it, make it roll, he wouldn't have to go get them all the time because he was small.
Byron's early success drove Hogan. He brought to the game the mind of a championship chess player, believing that 80% of winning is management. And he managed himself and the golf course with ruthless rigor. His nickname said it all, the Hawk. He came about as close as anyone to mastering golf from tee to green, thanks to a monkish devotion to hard work.
Hogan's gotten credit for inventing practice, and he took it to an art form. There's no question about that. And I'd go out and watch him practice, and he'd be hitting choke down 3-irons about 152 yards, and the caddy, the shag boy, wasn't moving a step in one direction or the other. And every now and then he'd turn around and say, "Come on, let's go play." He would just, with incredible ease, shoot 66, 67, 68 at Colonial on the back tees. And we'd come in and have a drink after the round, and I'd say, "Ben, that's about as good a round of golf as I've ever seen in my life." And he would say, "That wasn't a good round of golf." "Excuse me?" He said, "No, I didn't hit more than 2 shots that came out the way I wanted them to."
By 1948, he had won 30 times, that year highlighted by his first U.S. Open triumph. 8 months later, Ben Hogan was lucky to be alive. While he and his wife Valerie were returning from the 1949 West Coast swing, his car collided grill to grill with a Greyhound bus. His doctor said he might never walk again. 1 year later, walking on legs wrapped in elastic bandages, he returned to golf at the LA Open and finished second. He convinced any remaining doubters that June in the U.S. Open at Merion. Although in pain from the stress of walking a 36-hole final day, Hogan persevered. He tied Lloyd Mangrum and George Fazio in regulation play and then beat them in a playoff. That victory remains one of the most courageous performances in sports. But Hogan's vintage year was 1953. At Augusta, he lowered the tournament record by 5. At Oakmont, he led from wire to wire, taking the U.S. Open for the 4th time in his last 5 starts. And then he sailed across the Atlantic to play the British Open for the first and only time. Hogan assaulted the field in the cold and wind of Carnoustie. With a final round course record 68, he won by 4 strokes.
It was as good a golf as anybody could play. I mean, he drowned everybody. He just had this something about the way the ball sounded when it came off the club face. It didn't sound like anybody else's. It just had more authority.
He returns to the States a hero.
New York is really golf happy today. It's the biggest welcome the city has given any golfer since the heyday of Bobby Jones 23 years ago. Ben Hogan, the world's greatest golfer.
The era of Hogan, Nelson, and Snead transformed big-time golf into a game that was strictly for professionals, but only on the men's side.